Future with Sam Van Aken. Sam is an artist and associate professor at Syracuse University. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for having me. So, as Amy mentioned, I'm an artist and I am creating an orchard of heirloom fruit trees from varieties that originated or were historically grown in New York City. New York has a long history of agriculture. Before colonization, large parts of what is now Manhattan were cultivated by the Lene Lenape, and it continued to be used as farmland for much of the 18th and 19th century. So, those of you familiar with New York, imagine all of the Bowery being an enormous farm and filled with orchards. So, also much as it is today, people came from around the world. And as these people came, they brought seeds from fruit trees as a connection to their home. So, it was natural that New York also became the site of the first commercial fruit tree nursery in what is now Flushing, Queens. And as early as 1730, they were offering varieties of fruit that originated in New York, including the George IV peach, the green Newton Pippin apple, the Washington Gage plum, and these were all distributed throughout the colonies and also throughout the globe. And my own interest in these fruit began with an artwork I created entitled "The Tree of 40 Fruit," which is a single tree that grows 40 different varieties of peaches, plums, apricots, nectarines, cherries, and almonds all on one tree. And it's intended to be a normal looking tree throughout the majority of the year until it blossoms in different tones of pink and white throughout the spring and bears a multitude of fruit throughout the summer. And many people have asked, is this some product of GMO or, but it's actually the trees are built through the process of grafting. And this is where a branch is cut from one tree and it's cut and inserted into the root system of another tree. And since the seed of a fruit tree is a genetic variant of the parent, in order to reproduce a tree, reproduce a variety that we like, it needs to be grafted. So, the analogy I always use is like, imagine every single Macintosh apple that's grown in the world came from one tree. And this process has been done for 3,000 years. And so, even though I grew up on a farm, in many ways, when I started the project, I had no idea what I was working with. Yeah, I thought plums were blue and peaches were yellow, and I became amazed by the diversity within each fruit type. And I believe the image is up of one of plums from just one of the tree of 40 fruit in 1 week in August. And I realized how rare the varieties were that I was collecting, some of them dating back 2,000 years. And I became fascinated by not just the fact that these fruit carry a taste across thousands of years, but they also carry a story. And I set out to preserve them really like the only way I knew how, which was through art. But I realized these fruit needed to be experienced and to be seen and to be tasted. So currently in progress, the open orchard will be planted on Governor's Island, which is located just off the end of southern Manhattan. And it's a 5-minute ferry ride from Wall Street. Right now, there are 300 trees growing in a nursery on the island. 50 of these multi grafted trees will be planted on the island, but the other 250 will be planted in community orchards throughout the city, with each of them being placed to where they originated. And so, as an artwork, I look at the open orchard as a experiential setting. Since it's on an island separated from other trees, it's also a gene bank, but it's also very much a place for workshops. And so, currently, we're offering workshops or the Open Orchard School through Green Thumb and New York City Parks. And I like to think of the project in terms of being culture. I mean, we know, yeah, culture emerges from agriculture. It's what we value, how we care for those things, and how we share them. And my aim is to ultimately open source the entire project and make all these fruit and these pathways of growing available to people. And hopefully, create new ways for us to see and be and connect. So, yeah.
Wow, Sam, this project is such a spectacular mix of art and science and agriculture. It's just genius. And I was so looking forward to seeing one of your pieces up close and personal at the summit in DC, especially at Peak Bloom. But
Yeah.
alas, we'll need to wait for another time, I'm sure. But let's get to
Yeah.
some details. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about grafting is? This is the method that you use to actually create this tree. Can you tell our audience what grafting is?
Yeah. So, I guess, in short, it's a pretty simple process. What you're trying, I'll collect branches, usually in the dead of winter, so when the trees are dormant, and I refrigerate them until spring when the tree starts to blossom. And then there's hundreds of ways that it's been documented of being done, but I use just a simple process where you cut and you put a groove and you use a high-tech material like electrical tape to hold it all together, and you get a new tree.
So this is something we could all do, or
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
not
kidding. I'm
high
sure
end.
it takes a lot of skill.
Oh yeah, yeah, you can.
so,
No, no, it's poor timing. I
so
think
Sam, tell us why it's so important to preserve these plant varieties.
it was
I
interesting
think we had a
because
bit of a
when I
delay
started the
here. I'll
project,
ask the
I
question
couldn't
again.
find 40.
Oh,
Oh, we have a long delay. um, yeah. So in terms of why it's important to me was I when I first started, I couldn't find 40 varieties of these fruit, and I live in New York, which at the 100 years ago was this had grew hundreds of these varieties, and I discovered how rare they were, and then I felt all this responsibility to continue to grow them. So that's where it really started. But then as I would start to taste them, this is unlike anything that I've ever tasted or been introduced to. And so that was really where I started to learn more about them and realize that they are much more than just food.
yeah. So, how do we get
Right.
more information on Green Thumb and the
Okay.
Open Orchard School?
Yeah, if you go to the Green Thumb website, you'll they do tons of workshops, and so they'll have a listing. The next one that we're doing is actually a grafting workshop, which is on May 16th. Um, and since we can't do it in person, it'll be live from my backyard.
Great. Well, I hope we can all tune in. Sam, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was wonderful to hear a little bit more about what you've been doing, and hopefully, we can all see it in person at the next summit. So, thanks so much. So, I'd like to introduce my next guest with a short video. please welcome the founder and CEO of Parley for the Oceans, Cyril Gutsch. Cyril, you founded Parley for the Oceans really as a collaboration network for creators, thinkers, and leaders to raise awareness for oceans and to implement strategies that can end their destruction. For example, you've taken the fashion industry by storm, making products from ocean plastic. So, what role can design play in creating a brighter future for oceans and our planet?
Design plays a key role, but not design in a traditional way where you think only about delivering a specific need for a specific collection, more in a bigger sense that designers suddenly become responsible for the overall product. You don't want to be part of destruction. You don't want to put products into the market that actually contribute to what we now call the toxic age that we created. You want to actually know that the ingredients you're using, the ingredients you're putting out there that are touching the skin of consumers, that these ingredients are truly in sync with nature out there. And unfortunately, these are not the ingredients that we have available today. We're coming from a time where it was not really thought through what the negative impact of the materials are that we're using to create, to design, also to sell items. And we're moving towards what we call a material revolution, where we cannot accept these kind of materials anymore. And we are asking for drastic redesign. And the designer plays a key role because we are in the midst of it all. We have to understand supply chains. We have to address our demands towards the clients, the supply chains, and even now to other players. And that is where we come to the board. Parley is a collaboration network that has a vision, and the vision is to end the destruction we created with our old idea of design, where we are very ignorant, very intolerant towards nature and wildlife.
So, it sounds like Parley is just being incredibly innovative in figuring out how to fix some of the problems that we've caused for a brighter future. So, how has Parley worked with artists and designers to raise awareness for oceans?
So Parley is a new form of an environmental organization. And in 2012, when we learned that the death of the oceans could be the legacy of our generation, we back then decided, you know what, we don't want to run a design company anymore. We want to become a new form of an environmental organization. And an organization that is a network, that doesn't think that the solutions are within our walls, that really builds on a network of experts, cross-disciplinary, where science, environmentalists, companies, governments collaborate and honestly define a future, create future. And we find that it is really in the hands of a consumer to ask for new products. It's in the hands of designers to invent such visions. And it's in the hands of the private sector to drive change in a rapid speed. And in a way, this drastic change that we have to push now is only possible if we collaborate, if we create, and if we eco-innovate. It is not done by protest and is not done by blaming people. We have been very innocent for the last decades. We have been so full of ourselves and nearly arrogant. And now it's the time to step a little back, be humble, and say, we created a lot of nonsense and we created a lot of destruction. So why would we not convert all the knowledge that we have now and reinvent the building blocks of our economy?
Fantastic. So, I've got about 30 seconds left, but a lot of us are staying home right now, staying safe until this pandemic subsides. How can we use the current pause to really reassess and plan for the future?
First of all, we have been grounded by nature. We have been sent home. And in this confinement, we suddenly realized that we are not as invincible as we thought. We're actually fragile. And we need the chemistry of this planet, this sensitive, this fragile system to be alive. And I think this is the moment to appreciate our existence here and the time we have and also understand that nature has to be in collaboration with us, and we have to collaborate with nature.
Wonderful. Cyril, you are such an inspiration to so many. Thank you so much for sharing your story and all of your experiences and just your thoughts on how we should really be looking into the future for our oceans. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to catching up on everything
Thanks
you're
for having
doing.
me.
Thanks.